ContoursFx, and I'm a special effects and face and body painter. And
I'm Ellis. I'm nominally the person interviewing.
Yeah.
I'll have some questions that can get the conversation started, and then we can do some pinging back and forth if you guys have anything to add to whatever Dutch answers. Does that sound good? Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I'll do a brief introduction of Dutch that we can start with. So Dutch Bihary is a multimedia, now when I say multi, I mean lots and lots and lots of media artist. He does body painting, foam carving, tattooing, and lots of others that I'm sure we can get him to talk about. He was a competitor in the reality TV show Skin Wars, where he was a top 3 finalist. He subsequently competed in a spin-off competition called Skin Wars Fresh Paint, which involved mentoring an unfamiliar artist to the medium, so somebody who had never done body painting before. He currently runs an art-based business with his wife and his daughters, and I'm going to let Dutch take it from here because I know I'm missing some key details.
As an artist, you got to hustle. You got to have a lot of irons in the fire. COVID kind of did a number on my business, as you can imagine. There wasn't any makeup happening or special effects or any of that due to proximity to the subject issues. And so we kind of had to do a quick 180. I had to find something else to do to pay the bills for a while, and that's when I got into the foam sculpting. Fortunately, prior to the pandemic, I had been doing some foam sculpting for a couple of years, and so that sort of kind of became my main thing. And I really enjoy the work, but I'm going to be kind of reeling that back in here in the upcoming years and focusing more on my local business and getting back into face and body art again. My wife and my family and I, we've been, we were kind of like the business in the Seattle area, the sort of top shelf premier face painting company that used to do a lot of the corporate events for Amazon and Boeing and Microsoft and so forth. And we're going to be getting back into that line of work because I'm kind of burnt out on flying all over the world. It was a lot of fun for a while. It was kind of fun being a rock star, but it's tough on the family and life in general. So we're going to be reining that back in. And yeah, so I do all kinds of stuff. I do special effects makeup. I do work for movies and music videos and commercials and so forth. And I also do a lot of mural work. I also do wood burning. I also do, I'm kind of one of those guys that used to drive everybody nuts in high school because anything that I touched, I kind of made it look like I'd been doing it for 20 years. And so if it's artistic, I kind of just have a spark for figuring out the techniques very, very quickly. And then, of course, I'm kind of a voracious scarfer of factoids by nature, and so I do a lot of personal study, and I try to learn as much as I can about things so that I can, portray myself as a professional in those various things. But I've been doing the face and body paint for quite a lot of years now, and it's very fun. It's a very rewarding profession. Dealing with kids is a lot of fun. Dealing with the parents, not so much. So that's kind of most of what I do in a nutshell. I get hired a lot to go to trade shows and conventions to do demonstrations and teach. I teach at beauty colleges. I teach at special effects schools. Probably the longest, most impressive feather in my cap is I got called by Stan Winston Studio of Character Arts to do their master class for their airbrush portion of their college class. So if any of you have subscribed to Stan Winston and are learning things from that, it's an amazing website. I'm not promoting them or anything by any stretch, but holy cow, if you're a DIY person or you're into any of that sort of thing, it is a vast wellspring of knowledge from all of the best people in the special effects industry, from making fat suits or muscle suits to animatronics, puppeteering, the standard special effects, practical effects, as well as other forms of art that are sort of adjacent to those sorts of things. And it's a yearly subscription, and you sign up and you just get to watch these amazing videos from these artists, and I'm happy to count myself among them. So
you talked about being the jack of all trades, and you touch an art medium and you're good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the techniques between one medium and another are going to just naturally transfer. Like wood burning is going to naturally transfer into possibly wood carving, right? There's just the same. But how does the transferring go from one to the next when you're going from foam carving to like acrylic painting, for example? How does that transition work?
Well, the sculpting thing was kind of one of those ones that kind of snuck up on me. I hadn't really had terrible interest in sculpting, but I had done some special effects work, so I had done some, cast some life casts of people, and had to build up prosthetics that I had to produce for specific actors and whatnot. So I mean, I had some clay sculpting ability, but sculpting foam is a very, very different animal. Instead of an additive approach, it's a redactive approach. You have to sort of see the shape in a solid block and pull that shape out. And I had no idea I had a knack for that until I actually dug in and tried it. And when I did, I was kind of like, ooh, that was fun. So I kind of took off with that, and I've been doing that for quite some time now. I recently just did an 18-foot tall Bernie Wrightson-esque Frankenstein for Transworld, which I didn't see in any of the Transworld videos, so I'm not sure why they didn't put that out there. I think it was because I sculpted it and not the shop, so they're trying to promote their shop. But anyway, it turned out really, really good. I found out that I'm really fast at it too. So I had asked the owner of the shop that had hired me to do that particular sculpt, how long would this have taken your crew to do had you assigned them to do this sculpture? And he was just like, oh my gosh, that would have taken probably at least 4 weeks, and it probably would have taken 3 of my staff. Well, I knocked it out in 8 days by myself. So, there's some notoriety to kind of knowing your craft and really being proficient at what you do, and it goes a long way to getting me more work. And like I said, I really enjoy it, and I had no idea I was going to be good at it when I started. That story was the shop that I worked at locally. The owner came to me kind of frantically, just kind of out of the blue one day, and said, hey, do you think you could sculpt a headless horseman? And I was like, And you got to keep in mind that at this point, I hadn't really sculpted much. I'd just done a few kind of small little things, little Easter bunny, really basic stuff, kind of cartoony. And this particular thing that he was asking me to do was very elaborate. He was basing it on the one that's on display in Disneyland during Halloween time. But the pose of that particular sculpture was very static. The horse was just sort of standing there, and the horseman was just sort of standing there, sitting, upright, holding a pumpkin. It was very kind of, there wasn't a whole lot of dynamic movement going on with sculpture. And so he wanted the horse all rearing up, and he wanted the mane kind of flying in the wind, and the cloak, so I was just like, well, I don't know if I can do this in the time parameter, but I sure would like to take a hack at it. And so I knocked this thing out in a week. And it was modular, so it came apart in 5 different pieces, and it was attached to an armature that it could bolt to the floor. And so when I finished this thing, I was super chuffed. I was very impressed with myself, and the owner was very, very happy with what I'd produced. And we packed the thing up, and we shipped it. And when the client got the prop, they were beside themselves. They were like, this is absolutely way more than we ever expected. It turned out that all that they wanted was a cutout. And their intent was to paint it black, and they were going to shine a green light behind it and put a smoke machine around it, and it was going to be up in a tree line. It was just going to be sort of like a trail perimeter kind of a thing. So they were super happy with what they got. They ordered a Yugo, and we gave them a Mercedes. So yeah, and that just kind of uncorked everything, and I thought, man, the possibilities are just endless with this medium. And I was using a lot of influence from Michelangelo, the way that he used to sculpt hair and fabric drapery and all that stuff, as well as the musculature. And it just really uncorked something inside of me, and I found it to be incredibly fulfilling. Oh, well, that's actually the second one. That one's actually a little bigger than the first one that I did was more life size. That one was like 18 feet tall. So, yeah. I don't know actually what my wife pulled off of my phone. Like I said, I didn't know I was going to be doing a demonstration for you guys until like midnight last night. So, so my wife was going through my iPhone and trying to find some things that we might be able to show you guys.
So you were talking about traveling the world, and now you're kind of worn out from it. Were you traveling for this foam work as like design work for film, or what was dragging you around the world?
So most of what I would do is teaching this type of stuff, airbrushing and special effects makeup and things like that. The foam sculpting is more just continental United States. There's shops everywhere that produce this stuff. I do some work quite a bit at a shop in Vegas, over in Denver, South Carolina. There's obviously a lot of shops down in LA that I was trying to break into. And you know, it's these particular shops, they cater mostly to theme parks like Universal Studios and Six Flags and things like that. So, you know, all of the oversized caricatures that you see kind of, you know, around the park, you know, statues of Mickey Mouse and things like that, as an example. I haven't actually sculpted Mickey Mouse, but things like that is what I do. I really wanted to get involved with the Star Wars exhibit, but they had a pretty strong on-site staff doing that. But yeah, so the burnout's kind of a strong word. I'm not burnt out on it. It's more the juice isn't as worth the squeeze. I'm gone a lot. I'm sacrificing a lot. The money's okay, but I think if I were a little bit more local and focused, I think we would probably do better financially. And so that's kind of the driving factor with that. I still love the work. I still love teaching. I wanted to be a teacher my whole life. When I was in the 7th grade, and the teacher started asking you, well, you're going to have to start thinking about what kind of classes you want to take in high school. You want to start thinking about your career. And when they asked me what I wanted to be, I said I wanted to be an art teacher. But, you know, I grew up dirt poor. I lived in a canyon, off-grid, on a self-sufficient farm, out in the middle of nowhere. Logging and raising animals and growing crops and things like that. So I really didn't have a chance to do those sorts of things as a youth. So college was kind of out of the question. So I kind of manifested it. I just sort of, through my own tenacity and my own interests, just kind of built a name for myself, and the rest is history.
So you kind of did a lot of face painting, especially back in like 2006, I believe your website says, and you've evolved a lot of this from there, if I'm understanding it correctly. But you say that face painting is also one of your big loves, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. So
there is going to be a big difference between face painting and body painting, I imagine.
Sure.
How do you modulate between those two? Like, because body paint's going to have different curves, different pores. How do you? Well,
the trick with body art, face painting is literally character design. I'm transforming a face into something else. And it could be a butterfly or a fairy for a little girl, or it could be a skull for a little boy. One of my favorites to do on little boys is a Venom face, because they dig that. It's hard to come up with boy designs, but I got hundreds of them. So, but body painting is more gimmicky. Body painting, people typically do it for specific purposes. So it's product placement, advertisement, or they just use it as a means to promote an event, if you will. And so, it's not. I don't do competition body painting. I kind of refuse to. I have a kind of a personal philosophical issue with competition art. I think I mentioned that earlier at some other things. But I always felt like artists competing against each other was kind of a silly thing. So I never really got swept away in the competitions. I've had some bad experiences with the handful of competitions that I have done. I get treated differently and I get judged differently than my competitors because of my accolades and my history in this line of work. And so judging is very subjective. And it's kind of hard cheese to swallow sometimes when, you know, it's kind of like when you go to a Halloween costume contest and the guy that spent 3 months doing an elaborate costume with LEDs and internal smoke machines and prosthetics and leather work and all of this stuff loses to the gal that went to Spirit Halloween and got the I Dream of Jeannie costume because she's got, you know, false, you know, appendages. And she winds up winning the competition, you know. So it's hard because art is incredibly subjective, which is why I don't particularly care to do the competing part. And the analogy that I used in my little Q&A yesterday was, let's get Leonardo da Vinci up here on stage, and let's get Picasso up here on stage, and maybe Banksy and Andy Warhol, and you tell me who the best artist is, right? So, I mean, how do you judge something like that? There's all kinds of styles, there's all kinds of approaches, and different ways to convey different things, and so that sort of latitude in judging just always seemed kind of unfair to me. And so because I'm kind of a technically proficient artist and I like to deal with kind of illusion work, like I said, I kind of get treated a little differently when I'm judged. And oftentimes I will not win because, I mean, for instance, I'll tell you a story, and I'm not ashamed to say this. I was at a convention in the Midwest, and it was a who's who of body painters. It was literally the creme de la creme were all at this thing, and they were all competing, right? And it was just kind of like this weird unicorn event that just you never see. And we were stoked, all of it, because my industry is incredibly sharing and magnanimous. We're very close. Our peer group, there is no like internal competition or any one-upness going on in our industry. Everyone kind of just feeds off the next guy. It's very magnanimous. And when the promoter of this event found out who he had in his competition, they decided it wasn't a competition anymore after we had done all the work. Because he had some really, really big names that had been in the industry for 15, 20 years. And there was this new guy, Dutch, that kind of blew them all out of the water, and they couldn't figure out how to make that PC. So they just said, it's not a competition anymore. So that's kind of one example of what happens when I enter competitions. So anyway, it just sounds like sour grapes, but it's very true. The television show was much the same. My character's job on the television show was to be the guy everybody else had to figure out how to beat. It wasn't, what are you going to do to win this challenge today when they were interviewing the other contestants? It was, how are you going to beat Dutch? So it was kind of like a beat Bobby Filet kind of thing, right? And so I got edited to be the villain, which was also very hard cheese for me to swallow, because through sort of franken-splicing and clever editing, they were taking a lot of things that I was saying out of context and plugging them in moments that were really bad for my character to make me sound really haughty and really arrogant and mean even at times. And I'm just not that guy. Anyone who knows me would tell you that. Even my children, they were like, Dad, why did you say that? And I was like, I didn't say that. Well, I did say that, but there was a lot more to what I said than that. So, but that's reality TV for you. It's for entertainment. I mean, looking at everything in hindsight at this point nowadays, I can look back and have a chuckle about it. It was a very entertaining show. It ran on Netflix for 6 or 7 years, I think, and then Hulu picked it up for another 2 or 3 years, and then now I think it's on one of those like Fubo or something like that now. But so it's still out there. You can still watch it.
You also did the follow-up show, Fresh Paint, where you had to take on a mentee and kind of train them how to do it. What was your biggest challenge taking on a mentee who's great in his own field, which I believe was graphic design, and trying to make him technically proficient in your specialty?
Well, that was the challenge. I mean, in and of itself, these people typically worked in mediums that had nothing to do with paint or skin or makeup. I think one of my mentees was a cake decorator. So we had to take these people in hand and kind of show them the ropes and run them through some drills and try to just acquaint them as best we could with the mediums that they had to work with. And then, then of course there was the challenge itself, which were, they come up with some really crazy, bizarre challenges, I might add. But I will say that particular program was very rewarding. It was a lot better because it felt vindicating to me. I felt like my character was vindicated because people got to see me as me in my more natural element doing what I do. And they weren't doing any clever editing because the drama on that particular show was really all about these novices trying to fight their way through these impossible tasks, and not so much about trying to spin people's characters for positive screen value. And so it was a lot more fun for me. It was way better paying as well, I might add. So my wife really doesn't like me talking about Skin Wars all that much because of, even though the statute of limitations on my gag contracts are now long expired, it just kind of comes off like sour grapes. But the Skin Wars experience for me, I was not expecting it to be what it was. They had sold the whole concept of this show as legitimate competition. These people are competing for this prize money. And that's really not what it turned out to be. And in their defense, you can't have a television show that doesn't have controls and parameters, if you will. You can't just let artists kind of run amok and wind up with what you wind up with. So there were some things going on in that show that were directing outcomes of specific episodes in certain directions that were out of our control as the contestants. And so I basically found out on around day 9 or 10, so we were shooting episode 3 or something at that point, that the outcomes of the episodes were predetermined. And I was like, what? Because I was the only pro on the show at that time that was actually doing this full time for a living. And so that was a real shock to me. And so myself and several of the other contestants took exception to that, and it kind of started this whole brouhaha where we had to sit down and talk with the lawyers and the producers, and we basically got compensated to stay on for the rest of the show because I was like, look, you're taking me away from my business for a month to shoot this show, and you're basically just told me no matter how good I paint, I'm not winning that money, so I got to get back to work. So anyway, they took care of us, and it wound up being a really great show. And like I said, in hindsight now, it was an experience, and I would just maybe, if you ever get an opportunity to be on a reality TV show, get a lawyer. Yeah, make sure you read the contract really well. It actually did say in our contract that the show was I can't remember how they worded it, but it was a bunch of that legal jargon that basically stated this was a reality television show based on the premise of a competition elimination body paint challenge. So it was right there in black and white, but we thought that we were painting for our lives and this cash prize, and that's just not how that was set up. So
They got the wiggle words in based on, so it's
Yeah.
sort of related to. How does that kind of opportunity even come up? Do they just call you, or do you apply? And how do you prepare for it? You're going to be on this television show to do this. How do you mentally prepare for it? How do they contact you? Did you contact them? How does
the reality of that show, it's a funny story, if you want to bear with me for the story. I was actually supposed to be on another show. There was another body painting show that was being promoted called Naked Vegas. And it was based on a good friend of mine who happened to be one of the judges on my show, Robin Slonina. She ran a business in Las Vegas called Skin City, where she would paint go-go dancers and models and stuff for a lot of the events that happened around the Vegas area. She didn't like the direction that particular production company was going with her business model because it was basically going to be a fabrication based on her business. And so she backed out. And so what they did with that particular show is they kind of replaced Robin, used that whole premise, made their whole show with actors that weren't very talented. And that show had a single run and it was done. And I was supposed to be kind of one of the main characters on that. And they had told me, we're going to fly everybody to Florida to a body painting convention. And we're going to basically do some B-reel on you guys doing what it is that you do. And so in a convention setting, that's where a lot of us do most of our work. And so he said, just expect to have a camera crew following you around. Don't engage the camera, don't look into the camera, just do what you do naturally, and we're just gonna follow you around and kind of film you in your natural environment. And I got off the plane, no camera crew. Got to the convention, no camera crew. And I'm like, what's going on here? And I looked down the hallway, big long corridor, kind of like some of these corridors, and I saw one of my peers being followed around by cameras, and I saw another one of my peers being followed around by cameras, and then I saw a third guy who I had no idea was even going to be on the program, and it turned out he replaced me, and nobody called me and told me. So I became a standby, a backup to him, because he had been on Face Off, and he had more recognition on TV, so they wanted to use him. And so when I get grumpy, I do better. I work harder. Like if I'm mad, I'll go mow the lawn and trim the sidewalk and all that stuff. So that kind of like thing happened at that show, and I was doing, in my opinion, some of my best work at that particular show. I was knocking out body paint after body paint, and it was top shelf stuff. And so all these guys that were working for Gurney Productions were running around, and they were like, okay, well, who painted that one? It's like, well, that was Dutch. Well, who painted that one? Well, that was Dutch too. And the guys that had the cameras on them were so unaccustomed to being followed around by cameras that they were kind of choking a little bit. They weren't doing their best work, because they were nervous. And so on the third day of this particular convention, the producer, the guy who had talked to me on the phone and told me about all the stuff to expect when I had gotten there, he comes up to me and he's like, Dutch, hey, buddy, old pal, hey, man. I've been seeing some of your work around here, and we're going to make some changes. So yeah, it's going to be the Dutch show, and you're going to be the alpha male. You're going to be the head honcho. And he was trying to blow all this sunshine up my rear to try to get me back on board with the show. And I was done with it because I had already talked to the producer of Skin Wars, and I was like, yeah, I got something else going on now. So they found me based on the work that they'd seen at that show, and then they found out that I was an international instructor, and they hired me. I was basically a consultant for the show. I helped them develop the show before it was a show. I was the guy that they were calling up literally daily, and they were asking me questions like, yeah, hey, where would you source this material? Or what? So I was telling them, here's where you get your wigs. Here's where you get your airbrush equipment. The best paint for this, you get from this company. The best paint you get for this, you get from this company, and so forth and so on. So I was helping them sort of develop the show, and then at the last minute, they'd ask me if I actually wanted to be on the show, and I was like, no. That seems kind of shady. Are you guys looking for like a ringer, or what's going on here? Like, well, no, not really. You're going to be a contestant, and so this is where the red flags should have popped up in my head, but I was so excited to be on a TV show, I wasn't paying much attention, and I was getting cautionary advice from some other painters and people that had actually taken the time to get lawyers and stuff like that, and they had backed out of the show. But I just thought that this was just going to be a great opportunity for me to do my thing and get some more visibility for my craft and myself and my business. And so I agreed to do it. And it turned out that my skill set was being utilized to develop their plot, their storyline, and not in a way that was going to benefit me in any way, shape, or form. So it was an unfortunate thing. But like I said, I can kind of laugh about it now. But they sought me out because I had been doing a lot of this educating around the world for so many years, and I was basically they told me straight up. They said, "Well, every time we call somebody, and we're looking for contestants, your name comes up with every single person that we talk to, and so we really need you to be a part of this show." And I told them, "Look, I'd be happy to be a judge. I'd be happy to work in another capacity, on the show, but I just really not on board with, the competing aspect." And they talked me into it because I had always been an incredibly strong advocate for promoting body art as a fine art, as a legitimate art, and not some cheap little tawdry peep show kind of, softcore porn kind of a thing. Because, body painting had a stigma attached to it. And in some circles, it still does have a stigma attached. They don't understand, well, why would you paint a naked person? It doesn't make any sense. Obviously there's something sexual going on there. I was like, well, really no. And myself, my wife and I, we insist on doing PG-13 body paint anyway. So the models are wearing very discreet coverings that actually cover more real estate than most bikinis. So they're covered. If I go over to Africa or, Europe or some of those other places where, a nudity is not as big a deal, sure, we'll paint people nude because everybody's comfortable with it. But here in the States, I find it's just best for my comfort and the comfort of the model to make sure that they're covered. And we use a prosthetic applique for the pasties as well as the lower region. And they work beautifully. They disappear with no seam whatsoever, and they take the paint really, really well. So for all intents and purposes, the model does look nude, just without, obvious parts. So that's just kind of how I insist on doing it, just because it also helps the paint too. You don't have to try to disguise those things, if you will, make them disappear so much. And I don't want people getting the impression that I'm doing this for sexual reasons either. And because of my background in illustration, most of my pieces are very collage-like. They tell a story. They're lyrical in a sense where they, most body painting competitions, they have a theme. They come up with some obscure statement, and then you have to basically apply your creative talents to try to, do your version of whatever that theme is. And it's very creative. It's a very fast medium, and it's very temporary. And so if I do make a mistake, or if I wind up going down a tack that, maybe it didn't turn out as good as I'd like, it's just a learning opportunity, and I do it better next time. And so you just get better and better and better at it the more you do it. And so I don't have any hang-ups whatsoever about washing a body off and doing something else the next day.
So you say it's a fast medium. I never would have thought that. Looking at some of your paintings, they are so detailed.
Yeah.
Look at all this. There's just so much. Even here, we've got shadows, we've got different scales and everything. How is this fast?
Some of it is just the familiarity with the medium, knowing how to work with your tools efficiently. It's not as tough as you would think, especially if you have a strong illustrating background. I think the people that struggle the most with this sort of medium are people that maybe aren't as accomplished in their rendering abilities, because painting on a 3D surface with curves and stuff like that presents some challenges as well, but there are some simple ways to overcome those things and make them work for you instead of against you. And once those are kind of in your little tool of tricks, you use those things regularly, and the airbrush adds a great degree of latitude and speed to the amount of detail you can put into a project in a very short amount of time. I've never spent longer than 6 hours on a piece. In fact, the longest piece I've ever done was 6 hours. Most of the time I can get a very elaborate piece done. That's Michael Hearn. He's a professional bodybuilder all over the internet. Usually I can knock a piece out in 3 to 4 hours, full body head to toe. And that's if I'm not doing like a whole headdress and the whole kit and caboodle where that's concerned. But I don't do a whole lot of headdresses because I don't do competition body art. So I don't really have to.
So you're talking about how you want to promote making body art a form of fine art, make sure people understand that it's a fine art. Mm-hmm. You also have a background in tattoo art, is that right? Yeah,
I did try my hand at tattoos. I tattooed for about 4 years. I found it very easy. They like to, I think the industry at large likes to try to mystify that particular art form, and because there's a lot of ceremony. There's a lot of like undercurrent of gang belonging in tattooing, where you have to pay your dues and you have to work under somebody and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I'm like, well, no, I don't. And so I didn't subscribe to any of that macho stuff, and I just wanted to do my art, in another medium. And so I found a gentleman, David Alon's, amazing tattoo artist, but he tattoos gang members. He does face tattoos and neck tattoos and skull caps and just crazy kind of gang-related stuff. But he's a super sweet guy, and he agreed, like nobody else would, to kind of just make sure that I wasn't doing anything unsafe, that I was, following my protocols and not cross-contaminating or doing anything that might be unsafe to the client, and that he just kind of just watched over my shoulder while I did my first tattoo on, happened to be a neighbor of mine at the time, who just says, I trust you, man, I've seen your artwork, I think you're gonna do a good job. And so I did my very first tattoo, spent about 2 hours on it, and I got to about a 3/4 complete before he kind of tapped out and was like, yeah, we'll finish the rest another time. But I got it about 3/4 of the way done, and then David came up and he said, oh, let's have a look. And he's just like, fuck you, man. It was like, because I did this really elaborate, kind of photorealistic octopus, full color. And I said, well, the last thing I want to do is do a hard black outline and then just color it in like a coloring book like most tattoo artists typically tend to do. I said, I kind of want to build my values and do everything with color gradients instead of hard lines. And he's like, well, okay, it's your world, So he wasn't very confident that I was going to be able to pull it off. And so the only reason I'm not tattooing right now is I just don't get the opportunity to do the stuff that I like to do when I'm tattooing. 90% of the time somebody comes in the door, they pull out their phone, they say, I want this. And I'm like, well, I could redraw that for you and make it cool, or I could, we could talk about, the concept and maybe expand upon that or do something, but they're like, nah, no, I want this, exactly like this. And so much of my work was that, it was just tiny little flowers, infinity loops, a little skull, or whatever. And I was just like, I was burning out really fast. And so I eventually got out of it because I didn't have the opportunity, unfortunately, to do a whole lot of original pieces. I got to do a few, and the ones that I did, I'm very proud of. But I thought, I can't just hover over a job like this and do this for hours and hours and hours, day on end, So I wound up kind of backing out of that. And that's kind of when the sculpting thing started.
I worked in the tattoo industry, and it is insane. It's nothing like your body paint industry, right? Where everybody's helpful. And it's like the opposite, where they want to keep secrets from each other. They're going to tear each other down. The apprenticeship hazing is a big part of it. You have to do your 2 years, and you're going to be treated like garbage.
It's hard to explain that to people.
It's
It's all this unnecessary obstacles that are just inhibiting you from doing good work.
And if you don't finish your 2 years, right, you're not hireable because you're not an official artist or whatever. So it's a real horrible thing.
I actually had a biker who owned a tattoo parlor in town come to my shop with the intent to come and rattle my cage and scare me. Because I was on his turf. I had opened up a shop that he felt was too close to his, and he was going to come in, and I don't know if he was going to rough me up or not, or what his intention was, but it wasn't a good thing that he was planning to do, and he didn't know who he was coming to talk to either. It turned out that I had done an entire full body paint with prosthetics for a music video, and he was the guy that I was doing all the work on. And so when he saw it was me, his tune changed, and he was like, oh man, and he became very supportive at that point. But of course he did, warn me in the nicest way possible that I was doing it wrong and that I was probably gonna get some clapback from other tattoo artists in the area. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't have any. And that was a really big problem for a lot of people.
It's like trying to date a skinny cook, right?
What's that?
It's like trying to date a skinny cook.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So there was another tattoo artist that I used to rub elbows with quite frequently at
So if you're okay with it, let's see if we got any questions. We've just
sure,
got about
sure.
8 minutes left. Do we have any questions? No? Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious,
Oh, they've got a microphone since this is live streaming.
hello.
Theoretically, we got a microphone.
Maybe, check.
They're working on it.
Sibilance, great. All right, hi.
Hi.
Beautiful work, really enjoying your stories. My name is Sarah, and regarding the reality TV world, so it is highly scripted and highly controlled. You mentioned a gag order that you were under. I'm curious if you had to change what projects you could take on and what credit you could take for it, because I know a lot of, I've had some friends in the industry as well, all of a sudden, they're not able to take work for X, Y, and Z for a certain amount of time. And I was just wondering if you had to shift gears in that way as well, or if you could go back to body paint almost immediately. Thank you.
Yeah, they didn't have, those were actually things that I had to fight in the contract phase of me agreeing to do the show. Because they did have a lot of really ridiculous things in the contract that I had to sort of shoot down, lest I not do the show. But no, as far as getting back to work and doing my thing, I just couldn't reference the show. I couldn't, it was kind of like being taken to prison. I had to take my cell phone and my iPad and everything, we couldn't even have an iPod. That's how old this was. They took all that away from us. We couldn't read magazines, we couldn't watch television, we couldn't listen to the radio, we couldn't do any of those things. We were literally signing away our rights. And so we just couldn't talk about anything specific to the show for 5 years after the show aired. And they of course were sort of warning us that if we did talk about things like how the show was produced and what was going on behind the scenes, that there were some strong legal ramifications awaiting us if we did. I don't know how much of that was just posturing and scare tactics, but they don't want the general population to know that these things are so controlled. Because when the whole thing's said and done and it aired, it was a great show. It was very entertaining. It was fun to watch, right, for a lot of people. And it's actually very disappointing sometimes when they kind of find out that they are kind of all, to a certain degree, rigged, and the outcomes are sort of predetermined. For a lot of years afterward, I would wind up at trade shows and conventions with members and peers from other shows like Face Off and Ink Masters and so forth and so on. And we would kind of get in little huddles and we would share stories, and and it was the same with them as well. There was a lot of stuff going on there. What you see on TV and what happens in real life, very, very different. But no, I didn't have any controls over what I could do, aside from the fact that I had to be available to do, public stuff and promotional stuff on their whim. So like if they, had a junket or something and they wanted to bring us out for that, then they could call us up and we had to go do that. One thing that they didn't have in our contract, though, was they did a reunion episode, which only aired for a short time, and I haven't seen it re-air anywhere. But they brought all of the contestants back from the first show. And I said, well, I'm not contractually obligated to come do this, and I don't think you guys really had my best interest in mind to start with, and you didn't do me any favors, so thanks, but no thanks. Tell everyone whatever you want to tell them. Tell them I'm sick, tell them I'm traveling, whatever, but I'm not interested in coming back down to do this little reunion episode. And so I kind of had them by the short and curlies, and they kept calling me and hounding me. Well, we really need you to come do this show. It's going to be great. And they said, well, what is your resistance to this? How come you don't want to do this? And I was like, well, you guys painted me in such a bad light, and with no way to defend myself or explain to, because like I was saying earlier, I was very well known in the industry before the show, with my peers, internationally, I might add. And so I thought that the show was really going to hurt my reputation in the industry. And so that bothered me greatly. And so finally the big dog, the main producer, called me up and was like, what do we got to do to get you on the show, Dutch? And I said, well, let me explain myself. Let me tell people what was really going on the show. I'll be more than happy to come on the show as long as I can get some vindication. because everyone thought I was an asshat. Everyone thought I was this mean, grumpy, surly, arrogant guy. And I was just like, thanks a lot, guys. That wasn't necessary. And had they said, hey, Dutch, we're going to kind of WWF this up a little bit, and we want you to be like, the bad guy. I would have totally had fun with that, because then it would have been clear that I was playing a role or whatever, but that's not how that went down. Let me give you a short story, if we have time.
We're almost at the end, so.
Okay, well, I'll keep it as short as I can.
Okay.
We did an episode where we entered our work area and there was heads poking up through the table under a chafing dish lid. And the challenge was to paint these bald heads like a centerpiece for a dinner table from a specific country that was assigned to each individual artist. And everybody got these great places like Brazil and Mexico, and they got these iPads with predetermined pictures that were selected by the judges that we could use for inspiration. And like the gal that got Mexico, her pictures were of sedapes and sugar skulls and all these great maracas and stuff like that. And Brazil got, the rainforest and all the colorful birds and carnival and all that stuff. I got Switzerland. And the 3 pictures on my iPad were 3 separate pictures of the same mountain in the distance. And that was it, that's all I got. So that's kind of how they kind of leveled the playing field amongst the contestants. And so I wound up painting my bald head to be a snow globe with some, popular landmarks, because I thought, well, that might be a good centerpiece for a dinner table. Well, all of us, sort of the artists that were working that day, we all came to the conclusion that Gear, one of our contestants, a good friend of mine, had painted the best piece. His piece was very strong, and he was very proud of it, but he didn't even make it in the top 3 when it came time to judge that competition. And so he was feeling a certain kind of way about that. He was pretty grumpy. And that was the first day on the show where the camera crew, followed us back to our home where we were staying. And they had put out a bunch of alcohol and beer and stuff out on the island and they wanted us to kind of loosen up and talk a little candidly about how it all went. And Gear, being my friend, I, of course, was comforting him. I was like, hey, man, you knocked it out of the park, buddy. You know your piece kicked ass. And he's like, yeah, well, if it was so great, how come I didn't even make it in the top 3? I was like, well, you kind of blew the theme. The theme was to paint a centerpiece for a dinner table. You painted an iguana. Iguana doesn't belong on a dinner table. And he's just like, oh, yeah. And so he cheered up, right? And he's like, he understood. And it wasn't an elimination challenge, so there was no harm, no foul, right? Anyway, the way that scene was edited was they just had me coming out of left field saying, your piece doesn't belong on a dinner table, cut. And then they panned the room, and everybody's faces were like, like I'd said this horrible, off-the-cuff, mean thing, right? Well, those facial expressions were actually shot on a completely different day, and they just plugged those into that moment and sort of Frankenspliced this happening, that never really existed in real life. So that's how reality TV works.
All right.
Anyway, we're done. I hope you guys like what I painted. I did the best I could, but.
Thank you very much, Dutch. This was fantastic.
I'm sorry? Oh. Little 3-year-old.
There we go. Hey, that's fantastic. Creepy. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dutch, and thank you all
Thanks
for coming.
Coming, guys. I appreciate it.